Welcome to Inside Auto Podcast, where we feature everyone and anyone you'd want to talk to in and out of the automotive industry.
Ilana Shabtai here with Aaron Horowitz, hosts of Inside Auto Podcast, where we interview top GMs, dealers, marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in and out of the automotive industry. Before we introduce today's guest, this episode is sponsored by AutoLeadStar.com. AutoLeadStar is pioneering marketing automation in the automotive industry with sophisticated machine learning that future-proofs a dealership's marketing operations and replaces traditional marketing methods.
All right, Ilana, thank you. Welcome everyone to another episode of Inside Auto. We're super excited to be here. Super excited to have Matt Lasher on the show. Matt, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much. Really a pleasure to be here.
All right, awesome. So Matt is a very exciting guest for us. Everyone who checks out our podcast page sees the folks that we have on. Conversations are very interesting, very casual, very free-flowing, but very informative. And Matt brings with himself over 14 years of experience in marketing, and he manages and facilitates marketing for all of the West Herr Automotive Group stores. It's the largest group in New York with 23 stores, Matt, is that right?
26, about to be 27 in December here. So
growing by the minute here. Since we went on air, so 23 to 26 to 27. Also includes westher.com, social content creation, everything around the more technical connected sides of marketing and online reputation management. So Matt, we're super excited to have you here. Thank you very much and welcome. How are things in Buffalo?
Things in Buffalo are good. So we were talking a little bit off air about this, but over the last 4 or 5 months, really, we've had record financial results within our company. And it's been one of these interesting challenges because the world around us has not uniformly been experiencing this uptick. However, we just are trying to take each day as it comes and be grateful. And really, it's a testament to our team, how, hardworking individuals, our fixed ops team, who's been essential from day one, but our sales teams are operating at a throughput capacity that's much higher than we typically run at. So, everybody's really contributing and doing their job, and things have been going well.
Well, so on that topic, let's talk about this for a minute. You guys, look, this is such a massive global challenge, and the economic aspect of the pandemic and whatnot, but has West Herr as an organization had a chance to do things in the community? I know obviously, we can only do so much as small individuals and as companies, but what sort of things have you guys tried to do, be it for your team, be it for the community around you, as this pandemic's just dragged on?
Well, I think the first thing we probably tried to do related to the community was just set a good example. So we've been very aggressive and proactive with respect to PPE and, trying to make sure that we're doing all our social distancing and mask wearing and trying to reinforce that as a culture and, making sure that we set the right tone. We have over 500,000 customer transactions a year, people that come in through our buildings and sort of cycle through our facilities. And so with that comes a responsibility to present ourselves in a professional and responsible way. And obviously in this era of COVID, it's even more, important that we follow the protocols set forth by the government and that sort of thing. So that's step one. But, coming up here and for Thanksgiving, obviously I mentioned the financial success we've had over the last few months. We are doing an unusual or different Thanksgiving giveaway where we're giving 5,000 people in Western New York. So we're working with various agencies in Buffalo and Rochester to distribute the turkeys. And so it's just sort of a nice little gesture nod towards the community that, is experiencing some challenging times. So, but there's every day, it's a part of West Herr's culture. We're always contributing to nonprofits. We're always participating in fundraisers and, some of these virtual fundraising events that have happened now. And, that's just part of what we do. We spend, 7 figures a year on things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an amazing example of why kind of the local dealer and the community rooted dealer makes such an impact. And, sometimes when we think about where the world's going and, you look at kind of, let's call it like pure play tech platforms that are on the one hand, valued by the markets at $40-50 billion in aggregate, yet they represent a small percentage of car sales. But there's something about that disassociation from a local community that in their essence, they're just so different than a dealership, which has to contend with the people that walk in the door every day. And I think that that's what you just described is a real powerful example of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the tone is set by the leadership. So Scott Beeler is our president and CEO, and he gets all the credit for sort of this, I would say, somewhat overly generous or over-indexing on sort of our philanthropic efforts. These things don't always pencil, right? Like they're not like, sometimes I engage with some of these folks and they're like, oh, I'm going to make sure you get your advertising value out of it. And I try to explain to them, often we're not doing this for any sort of advertising value. Whether our logo is on this event or not isn't really material to our advertising or brand consideration, but it is over the long term, right? So over the short term, I don't think it pencils from like an efficiency perspective, but over the long term, I think doing this thousands and thousands of times over the last 40 years, really, right? As we've continued to grow and, we've been in business over 70 years, but, really doing a lot of things in a lot of different ways, that adds up, right? And we've had all these little micro moments where we're encouraging or making connection with somebody, that person that's on that board or that person that did that fundraiser at the school or, whatever. And those people, we're having individual impact on those people. And, ultimately, I think that serves us well in the long term.
Absolutely. Well said. Very well said. So Matt, tell us, and we like to hear people's personal stories a little bit just because, it's all about the people in the end, and the folks who listen also want to know who they're hearing from. So tell us with yourself, and I find that everyone has their unique story. What brought you to the industry? Kind of what's your immediate prior position before you suddenly found yourself in automotive and automotive marketing? And what was the state of the industry's marketing when you entered it?
So I got started, I went to the University of Colorado, and happenstance, a Nissan North America recruiter came to our school, and I interviewed with that person and got a job in Los Angeles working for Nissan and sales and marketing endeavors. Was there about 5 years.
That was right out of college.
Yeah, right out of college. So 1-800 Nissan Consumer Affairs was my first job out of college, and a great learning experience. I was dealing with dealers in the Northeast and sort of that rough New Yorker sort of attitude and talking about warranty claims and customer disputes and things of that nature. So really learned some really valuable customer service skills that I still use today. Loved that job because of the people that I got to interact with. There was a bunch of young kids. We were all sort of fresh out of college and living in Southern California, driving 350Zs. It was pretty cool. But after about 5 years, I looked around. I didn't really want to be any of my bosses. So I quit my job. I had about $10,000 to my name, and I was selling t-shirts out of the trunk of my car, playing poker full time to pay my bills. So every month, I was getting by, earning enough on the poker tables to pay my bills. And I did that for about 2 years. And I wanted to get married and have kids and settle down. And I was bouncing between LA and San Francisco and Vegas. And I had an opportunity to try automotive retail back in my hometown, Buffalo, New York. And so made that decision, and it was supposed to be a 2-year experiment. And, I think we're 12 years or so into it now. And, I did all the retail side of the jobs and, sales and F&I, and I was a sales manager and a used car manager for a few years. And all of those experiences have really helped, shape how I think about marketing. And also I think the effectiveness with which I operate internally, because my organization and the people within it also understand that I did some of their jobs, right? Like I'm not finger pointing or demanding or asking them to do anything that I didn't do, when I was on a desk. And so I think that helps give some credibility and help connect the dots between the sales and the marketing functions, which are very different. And I don't know if our industry talks enough about that. I think marketing as a discipline is underserved, underinvested in at the retail level in terms of skill set and teams, right? There aren't that many people in the industry like me. Relative to the size of the industry, oftentimes my experience is often it's somebody with a connection to leadership or ownership is often the marketing person, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that as long as they're intent on pressing into the discipline and building out the skill sets necessary to have effective functioning marketing teams, which is challenging in a sales dominated industry. Right. So it's an interesting spot to be in because you have to be in the fire. Right. I think CMOs have like the most documented short tenure of any C-suite executive in the US, at least. I don't know if that's a worldwide thing or whatever, but and it's largely because there's so much opinion in marketing. There's so much like well, I think this is the way. Right. And I think, and we all fall victim to that. I fall victim to that. But what I try to do is be very self-aware when I'm in that space. When I'm giving an opinion, I want to recognize that that's what it is. It's my own opinion based on my own perceptions and my own sphere of influence. And sometimes that jives with leadership and sometimes it doesn't. Right. And so I think marketing as a discipline can often be sort of undercut by what I call the hippo syndrome, or highest paid person's opinion. Sometimes people have no marketing skills whatsoever. They're very short-sighted or short-term thinkers. It's a balancing act, right? It's a very fascinating space to be in. But automotive is one of the best places to do marketing because you get to do all the things, right? You have access to all the technology. You can experiment. You got budgets. You got things to do. If you're like a marketing person at a struggling law firm, right? You have a limited budget. You got like $36 to experiment with on Facebook or whatever. Like, you might not have the resources that automotive has. So as long as the organization, the retailer provides enough cover for the marketing team, right? Sort of air cover, political cover to try, experiment, fail, push, learn, and rinse, repeat, and do it again. I think you can create some really successful, interesting dynamics.
Yeah. And I actually see that, like, the groups that we see that are most kind of evolved when it comes to their marketing, they tend to be where the marketing director and the owner have an extremely tight bond of trust, and that's that's what gives them that, exactly as you put it, that cover to work with the GMs and work through challenges and concerns the GMs have when there might be marketing wisdom that the GM isn't necessarily plugged into, and sometimes you have to make a tough have a tough conversation and say, like, look, this is just the way it has to be. Even though you want it this way, it wouldn't be smart for us to do that. We would damage ourselves and whatnot. I've seen that.
I really think it's a balance of short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. Like, that's where
auto's a 30-day business, so you got to get beyond it.
It's such a month-to-month business, and there's so much like on leads and like short-term sales results, market share, things of that nature, which is really an executional challenge at the store. Regardless of how many leads that a marketing team may create to a dealership or not, how effective they are in the short term is based on store leadership and store follow-up and store thoroughness and store execution, right? Just in customer service and getting after it. But the long-term marketing challenges, tech stack challenges, database challenges, vendor management issues, some of these things that are really hard to deal with that do take time. They take years maybe in terms of change management and sort of behavioral management within the organization. These are really challenging issues that without the appropriate cover will never succeed. Because it's it's just too easy to finger point to marketing on a bad month and say, they sucked this month.
Right. No, and you really see that with those kind of owners who have that vision and they're plugged into that. Yeah. By the way, I could tell Buffalo was not just where you were because of your seemingly Cleveland Browns. I'm from Cleveland. Cleveland Browns level affection for your football team. So that was my clue on the when you go to your Twitter, it's just all Buffalo Bills. So,
we've had some fun. So, I've gotten to know some of the Buffalo Bills players personally. We've done a few things, sort of like influencer campaign style things, and gotten to know some of the players. So 10 years ago, if you would have asked me if I cared about the Buffalo Bills, I would have said no. But now at a human level, I really am rooting for these guys, and it just so happens they happen to be pretty good. So like, you have this fanfare and this enthusiasm in the community for it. It's fascinating. So it's
my father was a high school and college coach, so I always appreciate when a post has an X and an O's in it. It's a wonderful thing to go into. I guess like when I think of you, when I think of your there's just it's kind of like, if I had to sum it up, it's probably the single most acute exposition of just the complexities, the challenges, the sophistication of the industry, yet the kind of immaturity of aspects of it, or the over maturity of other aspects of it. And I think you look at some of the things that you've written about, and I like these amazing lines that you've put out there. With a single email, I can ask my vendor to crank up the spend to $15,000 and magically it disappears. Some of my website stats might even go up. Unfortunately, the sales column doesn't. Or, when you're talking about the propaganda war in Detroit and how kind of essentially we are all just a product of these big kind of, corporate titan battles to convince us of what's working, what's not working, and to own the attribution, meaning the vendor that owns the attribution in the CRM to the inducted will win the account month over month. That may have nothing to do with what's actually driving business, right? So I think that just leads me to this like feeling of like, what's a dealer to do when I finish all your writing? And it's very interesting. But I ask you that, meaning, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think, obviously, even listening to you sort of re-paraphrase my perspective, I would say I have somewhat of a anti-corporate bent, right? And I don't know if it was by, when I was at Nissan moved the headquarters from Los Angeles to Nashville, Tennessee. They did that to cut payroll costs and to get tax savings. They basically eliminated or forced people to move to Tennessee who had gotten them out of bankruptcy from 1999. So I saw sort of like this corporate callousness that I believe multinationals operate within, because it's a ruthless, constant efficiency game. What's nice about being in retail, especially being a privately held company at West Herr, is the ownership cares deeply about the employees. That's one of the fundamental truths of the company, to the point where many of the positions are overpaid. Potentially, you could create that argument, but it's done because of loyalty and commitment to the people within the ranks. And so I think I do have that bias within my own perspective of the industry, but I have this luxury or privilege or whatever of representing over 20 OEM brands. So we have this fascinating relationship with OEMs. It's somewhat tense at times. It's somewhat favorable at times, but we always have to recognize that we don't make the cars. So we have this responsibility to be a good corporate citizen, right? And so often decisions are being made now with increasing frequency lately of what's the correct political play. So if BMW wants to do this shift digital heavy up campaign that we've done several times with no measurable results, no meaningful attribution, no usefulness, well, we still do it, right? It may be the incorrect play from a monetary resource perspective.
As a citizen, you do it. I mean, you're saying that
as
essentially,
a corporate citizen partner.
You're saying that as a quality, meaning you must, like, that's part of the kind of dues you pay to be a citizen.
It's part of the game, right? So I think you have to play by the rules of the game that exist within, this franchise structure and all of that. How we go to market with our used cars, how we do our in-store process, I think is largely up to us. However, it is at competing odds with some of the required technology that we have to use within the industry. And so some of my ambitions from a customer service and consumer perspective is to eliminate friction wherever possible. But unfortunately, we have siloed sets of data. We have a bazillion tools in companies that we work with, none of which work together. So to create a seamless customer experience is challenging, right? Like if Carvana builds their own tech stack from within, or CarMax even, because they just are operating more on a used car basis and they don't really need to oblige these OEMs. It's easier
and what have you. Yep.
Right. It's easier to pull off. So, I think we find ourselves now in this spot of like, what do we do now that we know what we know? Do we build our own tech? Do we invest in that ecosystem? We're a big enough company to do it. And so now we're having fascinating conversations about, well, look, we have this perspective of what can work and what should work, right? But we're entirely reliant on these big tech conglomerates that really don't have the same vested interest. We are not aligned in our business objectives. The tech companies really are milking the cow, so to speak, right? When DealerTrack or Dealer.com sold to DealerTrack, sold to Cox for $4 billion, what does Cox want? They want their $4 billion back, right? They're incentivized to get that money back and to get reoccurring revenue on a go-forward basis. They're not incentivized to revolutionize themselves. And this was very apparent with VinSolutions versus the Dealer.com CRM. Admittedly, the boardroom at Cox said the DDC CRM was better. It was technologically superior. However, VinSolutions had a $100 million a year reoccurring revenue portfolio. They did not want to risk the disruption of that. So what did they do? They shut down the 10 or 15 or $20 million a year product, right? Under this guise of efficiency, of innovation, and we're just going to focus on one CRM or whatever. And what's changed at VinSolutions? Very little. Right? Superficial reporting or whatever, but really nothing. I mean, it's the same thing that it was 10 years ago. So you get these fascinating decisions being made at a corporate level, Cox, that's maybe to the disadvantage of a retailer like West Herr, right? Who could maybe benefit from a different type of technological solution, a customer first oriented solution. And so I think that's a really clear example of how, and look, we pay, by and large, Cox employs a ton of great people. We've had a lot of, good things that have happened as a result of our relationship with Cox, but we pay them an inordinate amount of money every single month, right?
Yep.
And for them not to be aligned perfectly with where we need to head with respect to our customer experience is dangerous for retailers like West Herr. As we become these big regionalized dense groups, we have more and more opportunity and leverage. You look at Walzer, you look at Herb Chambers, or there's countless groups like West Herr around the country now that have this regional density that really, really need to care about this ecosystem of customer experience. And it's not OEM specific. So it can't be OEM dependent on how Chevy wants to go to market or Ford wants to go to market, or how the in-store process should be with a Genius or not a Genius, or, whatever, like all these different experiments that are happening. So it's a really interesting tug of war right now that we're in.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting sign of like a market that has some challenges on the healthiness of it. If the interests of the, as you pointed out, kind of the technology infrastructure is not aligned with the needs of the retailers. There's also an element just of, I think I look at these regional groups or groups that have regional density, and you look at the competitive dynamics that are changing. I mean, there are people who are trying to sell nationally now. And the pure play digital are trying to pull the CarMaxes and the Lithias and others. They have to go national compete. Well, what happens to that single point? What happens to that 3 point? What happens to that regional group? There has to be thinking around how do you compete and really fortify your regional position, but then also understand how you're going to be protecting your business from all these people who are be pouring in troops and arms from the outside. It's a real conundrum.
Look at Instacart, right? So I get my groceries from a grocery store that's 30 miles away or 15 miles away, right? I have a grocery store 1 mile from my house that never would have thought that grocery store 15 miles away would be the competitor. But I go there because their produce is better and they just do a better job with expiration dates and things of that nature, right? So Instacart has basically created this platform and this opportunity to lose business for the local retailer. So I think the same thing can happen in auto with Amazon. If Amazon buys 10 Ford dealerships 300 miles apart across the whole country, they can deliver new Fords to everyone in the country. And what do I do with that? You know what I mean? But I think this relationship and where West Herr is, where our sustainable competitive advantage is, I think, is in the relationships that we have with people and in the community. So we have 350 salespeople that know however many thousands of people that they know, right? And so people buy from people know and trust, at least in our market. Now, I know there's a lot of documented, evidence of loyalty waning and people moving on and young millennials not caring about that stuff, but it's still a big decision. It's still something that you want to go to for somebody that you trust, as long as we can continue to facilitate that relationship. So I think that's where, technology really should be aimed squarely at, making it much easier. You don't switch your bank account because it's a pain in the ass, right? But you can switch car dealers. It's relatively easy. But if you just had your portfolio of ownership experience, credit cards on file, seamless service experiences, predictive scheduling, whatever, like equity, real-time equity alerts, like all sorts of things that can make the consumer experience better, right? I think dealerships like West Herr then can have a really interesting built-in advantage, because why would you go anywhere else? We're making it so easy 100%. For you. Yeah, you can go buy your thing at Amazon if you want, I guess. But if you have a problem with the car and you got to go deal with a 1-800 Amazon number, or you can just come down the street and deal with us and we'll try to, make it right. So who knows? But I think for the foreseeable future, that's what we're, hanging our hat on.
It's a platform you can build on.
That's right.
And Matt, I know you spoke a little bit about your marketing team and what that's been like to build that at West Herr. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what that team looks like and how you kind of strike the balance between playing the game and moving forward with all the bureaucracies that you have to with all the 30 plus brands that you work with, and then also being creative and being able to utilize your marketing team for more business, more sales ready prospects coming into West Herr.
Well, so we have a senior leadership team. We have 3 variable directors that sort of chop up the 26 stores that we have. So I would say the variable directors, one of their primary jobs is to sort of maintain that OEM relationship. It's not feasible for me to have a deep, meaningful relationship with every OEM. There's just too many people, not enough time, not enough me, right? So sort of diversify that through the variable directors. However, so the marketing team prior to me, or prior to 10 years ago, or whatever, West Herr didn't really have a central marketing department. We had several specialties. We had a e-commerce person. We had an advertising person that was really the newspaper. We had a different person that was sort of like direct mail or TV stuff, so it was really this like fragmented thing, and they were all sort of working independently. So, it started with, me just kind of trying to be this Tasmanian devil and get some gravity around marketing and get some consistency of messaging, consistency of imagery, just kind of caring a little bit about all of that. And then realizing that we're going to need a team to sort of continue to operate and service the network, right? So I view the marketing team as a service department for the company, not too different from like an IT department, right? So we're trying to listen, we're trying to hear what's happening operationally, we're trying to be empathetic to the needs of each sales department and sales team, as well as being aware of macro trends and what's happening on the consumer side, as well as technology, and how do we deliver messaging to people at timely, relevant moments, right? So I think we have all of those things. And then as I look at our team and how we operate, there are sometimes weaknesses where we don't have maybe, enough resources deployed. So maybe like right now, top of my mind is website management in general. We have so many websites that, that's a position that, I'm thinking about filling just to sort of manage, is our SEO up to date? Is our, what buttons are broken on a website? Like just to get through 35 websites or whatever that we have, is a lot of work just by itself, right? So it can't just be one graphic designer. It can't just be one social media person. As we grow, we're growing in Rochester. So we have Buffalo and Rochester, 2 communities. How do we sort of think about that now, right? And so we're going to continue to evolve our marketing department to the best that we can service our leadership team, right? And my role within that is to stay very close to the leadership team and make sure I'm on the pulse. Right. So I can't be outside of that pocket. Otherwise, then we're just alienating ourselves and we're just doing what we think we should be doing or what we believe is to be right or whatever. And we have to balance both consumer and internal team demands. And so it's grown over the last 10 years, right? And so we have a variety of people working within. We also have some freelancers that we deploy as, workload gets higher. And we have a lot of like creative little, I'll call them ninjas, right? These sort of producer, editor people that sort of can film some stuff for us, can edit some stuff for us, can create these like mini content things for us in social. And, that's something that I'm pretty proud of that we're doing.
Awesome. That sounds great. Okay, Matt, this was a really good conversation. We really appreciated it. And we know how busy things are, especially during these crazy times, doing these calls from home. So we want to thank you for your time. Thank you for all the conversation. We definitely look forward to staying in touch and hopefully have you back here on Inside Auto. Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much for the time.
All right, everybody. Take care. You can check out our Inside Auto podcast on autoleadstar.com/podcast or on our podcast website or on Stitcher, Apple Podcast, everywhere you get your podcasts.
You got it.
Everywhere. We're all over. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Inside Auto Podcast. Check out our other episodes with top entrepreneurs and industry leaders.